So I'm going to, yeah, we can kind of start in a very cruisy way. Before we jump into the module of week 2, we go in a bit more in detail. We'll build up on what we touch on week 1. So I think this is kind of good opportunity before we jump into the material of tonight's session, and we'll try to cover as much as we can.
Hello.
You have any, if you have any questions from last week that you want to ask, or some of the topics we have touched, and is not yet clear, or you would like to touch base again, that we can do a quite 5 minutes chat over what we covered last week, as well as if you have any questions regarding the assessment. So if you have any question, Zoe, Mercy, and Samantha and Kate, we can just go through again, and I'll be happy to describe in depth on the material that we have covered. What do you think?
I did have one quick question regarding the assessment. I just wanted to know if the architectural buildings or interior environments had to be places like where we're living, or if they could be from traveling or anything like that.
Look, ideally, would be a place that you can walk in and experience. It's very difficult to understand a place, be they an architectural building or an interior building, to understand how actually the space works. And the end of the day, we do design for people, and as a result, it's really important that our perception or our feeling is in a way in symphony with the perception that we have on the place. So my recommendation, and the recommendation for the curriculum, is to, if possible, have a place that you can walk into it, and take your half an hour and see how the lighting is working. You could also visit, if you can, a time during the day, during the daylight, and a time during the evening light, so you can experience how the place feels and looks with the natural light, and as well as with the artificial light.
Okay.
Yes.
No, that makes sense. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So why we do that is because we can see a picture, but a picture it only provides us a two-dimensional information.
Yeah.
So you can see a picture and say, "Oh, this is fantastic! It's a beautiful picture." But when I walk into the place, I might realize that actually, oh, the picture is beautiful, but the place is really horrible because the lighting is not working quite nicely. The color of the wall, they're actually very dark, and you have the sense of feeling of not joyful feeling, or not happiness, or a sense of unsettlement. And that's where it's really important that in this exercise we do have access on the place, so we can use our perception to have an understanding of the place in its totality. Now, this is more so important if you are an interior designer. We design the space for the activity, and so it's really, really important that we do experience that walking to the place, but also not only the visual perception, but as well the auditory perception. So they will give you good 360 degree. Now, I understand that because it's an online course, you might, some of you might not have access to a workplace because of where they live. So in that case, you can, just let me know, and we can see if you have another accessible place for you to, to look into it.
Mhm.
So to summarize, it's really important that you have access to the place. Okay. Katie, welcome. Great. So we have had a few join us. Terrific. Now, any other question regarding last week? No, all good. Okay, terrific. Now, another thing I want to touch base is I haven't posted on the forum, but I will do tomorrow, is that we have kind of provide a timetable fixed for the next 12 weeks. And I will be online on Monday for design drawing and as well for color exploration on Thursday. And we can do a 4 to 5 session, and there is more the time available between you and I, and we can have this Zoom session. So it will be ideal that you can email me beforehand, let's say even in the morning, and say, Marco, I have 5 minutes or 10 minutes session, and because you might need some feedback on the work you want to show us, or you want to have a bit of help on the work that you're undertaking. So you kind of have 4 to 5 on Monday. We can have the Zoom session that if you need it, and we can do a one-on-one. And then if anyone else want to join, you can join as well. But it's really important that you kind of email beforehand so we can, I can ensure there is no overlapping with the schedule with everyone. Now, this will be very helpful more during the assessment, so you can have the opportunity to show your work, and through that we can discuss and give you feedback, and these feedbacks will help you to produce a more refined work. Now, one of the things they might be could of a challenge for you is it will take a bit of a practice, so don't be afraid that your drawing might not be as great or exceptionally as you might dream of it, because it's just a matter of practice and technique, and just do it. The first drawing will not be that excellent, but I'm sure by your 10th test or your 10th practice, you will be quite come a long way very nicely. So it's kind of you learn as you practice your way through your drawing. So really, really important. Don't be afraid to make any mistake, because in the end of the day, it's through the practice that you'll be able to improve your skill in the technique. It's just a matter of practicing and drawing. And my recommendation for, especially for design drawing, as I mentioned last week, is to have a notepad and just sketch everything that you can see. What is really important is if you are able to do on a daily practice, even 10 minutes per day, they will really give you more confidence with the pencil, with the paper, and you start to learn how to use different pressure of the pencil on the paper to get a different stroke and different impression or tonal value to it. So I want to really stress it out. Practice is really important in design drawing. Have your notepad, and it can be anything. It doesn't need to be something specific. It can be an object. And even for 3D lab drawing, that is a really good practice. So don't be afraid to do that. It's just a matter of like your 5 minutes jogging per day to tone your muscle And that's what we do is 5 minutes drawing per day. It on your brain muscle and will help you to create your visual perception of how the reality is perceived through your drawing. So make sure that you always have a pencil with you. We can even have two. And again, have a notepad. Now, if you like, then we can even look at the equipment that if you need it. So if you feel that we can have a review, we can go through that as well today or tonight after when we finish the session. How many of you has downloaded the list that was on Canvas? Excellent. What about you, Kate?
What list was it, sorry?
A list of the equipment uploaded on Canvas.
Yes, I've downloaded it, yeah.
Okay, so if you feel like, guys and ladies, we can go through and I can point it out what is essential so you don't have to buy everything all in one go. Because I think it's quite taxing and quite expensive as well. Okay, so if, okay, terrific, Mercy. Okay, so if everyone is happy, we can start with Design Drawing Week Module 2, and I'm going to share my monitor. Okay, I believe everyone can see it, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So Design Drawing Module Week 2 module. And let's have a look at the agenda we're going to have this week. So we're going to touch base more on 2D shapes and 3D forms. We'll then have a look into the different shading techniques. And then we'll as well expand into the type of hand rendering. And from the hand rendering, we'll go into a more color pencil and watercolor rendering. So from the black and white and tonal value, we'll see how to add color to emphasize the rendering for the drawing. And lastly, we'll go to mixing technique. What is really important is that when we have experienced the basic of shading and end rendering, we'll then can mix together the different techniques to give more a unique style and unique character of your drawing for your client. So again, it's almost like breaking down the first basic elements, and then as we move forward, you will be able to mix the technique with really beautiful results. So this is the end result. And as you progress through with your career and with your course in this 2 to 3 years bachelor course, you will also find out what is your best tools to do your drawing and your rendering technique. So let's go into the next topic, from 2D shapes to 3D form. So what is the difference between 2D shape and 3D form is nothing else than how we communicate the object in a 3D environment, in a 3D space. Now, what we have seen last week, we have looked at the orthographic projection. Now, we have seen that this orthographic projection is the view from the top. So if I kind of see my chair from the top view, I will have the sitting right in there, and then I have my back sit and with the leg in there. So these are kind of technical drawing that will help us to provide a proper measurement to give to the craftsman, but as well as to provide the detail to be able to then draw in a three-dimensional representation. In this case, we can really have a clear idea how actually our chair is composed or is based on it. So we can see that the chair, actually the leg is a bit lower on the back side rather than on the front side. And so it provides the full immersion of the perception of how that 3D form is developed more in depth. So we see that 2D shapes are actually an integral part of the 3D drawing. So it's almost like we have a 2D drawing first, that comes first, and from the 2D drawing, we are able to define the third dimension, or that might be as an isometric or as a perspective. So always remember, we always have two sets of drawing in 2D and in 3D object. Now on the next slide, we're looking at how we construct depth forms, and we always start with two-dimensional shape. In this case, we always start with a square, and we always start with a circle, and as well we start with a cone or a triangle. Now, as we have seen last week, these are your three basic shapes. With these three basic shapes, you should be able to draw and design anything in a three-dimensional. So how do we do that? Well, we have two techniques to do that, to design in 3D. One is the use of perspective, which is more an illusion of the reality. And the second one is what we call is to draw an isometric. Now, what are the differences between these two? We'll have a look at more in depth as we progress through. But these are the two 3D drawing that we will use it through your career, isometric and perspective. So remember quite clearly, these are your two methods to represent 3D drawing. Now, on the perspective, we'll start from a square, and then we will extend the side of the square, and that will give us the perception of the 3D form. With a perspective, using the technique of one focal point, we just converge all of the line into the horizon, and they will give us a sense of space and depth, an illusion of it. So that's your one-point perspective. And with that, you will kind of have a more an illusion of the space as we perceive it. Now, following the next weeks, we'll go through more how do we draw a perspective, a one-point perspective, a two-point perspective. Now, the difference between the isometric and the perspective is very simple. On the isometric, there will no distortion on the side. But if we have our cube, for instance, all of the side of our volume will be equally. Whereas on the perspective, the side will not be equal, but will be distorted. So why do we need these two different drawings to represent the 3D? Well, very simple. The first one is to give a sense of how the space will look in reality. And the second one is more to be used as a technical tool for a specific size, a specific drawing. So one is more a technical, the isometric is more a technical 3D drawing, whereas the perspective is more of an artist's impression of the space that you want to represent. Now, what we also need to look into it, we touch base about structure now. Do you remember we have talked about structure last week and how the structure helped to build your 3D forms? Now, with a sphere, for instance, which is just a circle, we can really have the structure by dividing equally the axis of the circle. And so with an elliptical tool, we just draw the depth or the volume to create that sense of three-dimensional object or that sense of volume of the sphere. And so it goes with the cone. The cone is nothing else than a triangle. They use an elliptical or an ellipsis. But we use the ellipses because in perspective, when I saw the circle, it just pretty much just break down all in the focal point. And how does it work there? Well, if I draw the circle in a perspective with my focal point, which is the point or infinite point in the horizon line, I pretty much draw a square first, and then I create my middle axis. And then I draw the arc, and that will give me the sense of perspective of the square. And so if I do the next one, I will do the same technique, and then I will be able to draw my square. So in this case, I'm able to draw from a series of ellipses the cylindra. And you can see they all come down from the square, the circle, and the triangle. So in summary, we are able to draw a volume by using the square, and with a sense of perspective, we add the dimension and depth to the object. Now, if you look everything around you, you should be able to really very simple create the outline of a complex object through the use of this square, circle, and triangle. Now remember, we say square, but it also can become a rectangle, or we can even have an elliptical square, because it's the combination of this, the square and the circle. Now, what is nice is with the freehand drawing, you can practice. Like for instance, you have a desk or a table, and what I suggest is, if you have your desk over there, so what you want to do is just your practice. Just do a simple, outline of the volume. But you can see now we can create the leg from there. We can create the side of the table. And we just can use the sense of depth. We can create the top of your table, and then with different color, we can pretty much outline our beautiful drawing of the table. Now that should give you a very quick demonstration how the square and all of the other part is going to be combined. Now if I have my table, I have my rounded table, and so what I'm going to do is I have the rounded corner, or from there I can create my elliptical table, and then I just keep working, keep drawing. So what is the exercise in here? Well, the exercise is very simple. It's trying to train your eye to look at the complexity of the object in front of you and try to simplify them in a very basic shape or basic form using the square, the circle, and the triangle. Yeah? So this is the exercise. It's almost like gosh, I'm really overwhelmed with the complexity of what I see. How do I do that? Well, the easy way, the technique to do it is very simple. Use the basic shape of your square, circle, elliptical, and triangle to simplify the complexity of what you see. It's kind of you reverse engineer what you see. You just see complexity. Your duty is to simplify what you see, and then you reverse again engineer and you go and draw more in detail as you zoom in. So it's kind of a reverse cycle. Simplify, and from the simplification, then you create complexity. Okay, so you see complexity, you simplify, and then you go further down your drawing to refine your complexity. It's kind of a circle. Okay, so next we're going to have a look at it from square to cube. So we have seen it previously how that is going to work it out. And again, what you might have it is that, you know, from this object you might have a hole. So you draw another square right in there, and then you draw converge to the infinite point. And then you say, okay, that is actually the behind of my side, and they will pretty much do that. And as you can see, you are just creating your beautiful cube, and that can be whatever object you need to represent. And then you add more thickness to the outline to define more the space of it. But we'll touch base more in detail about this as we work through. Again, we have seen from ellipse to cone and cylinder in the previous demonstration. Again, here you can see we really start to, you know, we really start from the elliptical. Then how do I know that is the center point? Well, again, you just work your axis, and from your axis, you're able to quantify what is your middle point or center. Just rise it up to the Y, and then you merge on the edge. And from there you have your cone. So let's say I want to have a truncoid cone. What I'm going to do, again, I just broken right in there. I have my sense of perspective, use it, line over there, and again I use the elliptical, and now I have a different shape. And from there what actually happen is they are in my drawing. I say, okay, okay, that looks a beautiful chair, so I might join a back seat. So I do draw an elliptical, and then I just need a stand to connect. And what I have right in there is a kind of a sketch drawing of a possible stool I want to have. And then I just refine the outline with another pencil. And there it is. I have my simple, if I do a two-dimensional drawing, I will have my kind of 80-looking stool. And there's my front view. And if I want to have a look at it on the top view, then what I will have it, I have my back seat, my top seat, and as well I have my bottom. So that demonstrates that your two-dimensional drawing and three-dimensional drawing, they actually interlink together. While drawing 2D, you are able to expand into a 3D form. And while you do a 3D form, you're able to convert back into two-dimensional form. So always remember, two-dimensional and three-dimensional drawing, these are your element of what we call construction drawing in everything that you trying to visualize or show in your intention of your project, of your design to it. Now again, we see the eye level, that is pretty much your, again, your horizontal line. And there is a focal point, and that's why we have a different width for your ellipses. So the closer your ellipses is to the horizontal line, and the squashed the illusion becomes, the further they are on the sky level and on the ground, the wider your elliptical things will be. And that's because of the plane that we draw it as we move up and down. Of your object, of your line. But again, tonight we're not going to look at the technique of perspective, just the idea how, in principle, the theory perspective, a perception of the space is actually applied to the drawing. Okay, on the next line, we go from circle to sphere. Again, we always start from the circle, and then we show the horizontal and vertical axis, and as well the diagonal one. Okay, so usually the diagonal one are 45 degrees. It's always, when we draw, we divide in equal space or in equal par the space. Even when you draw, your drawing always use always the equal and 45 degrees, that your basic. Then the next step, you go to your 30 degrees and so on. I usually always go to equal, break down half. And again, if I see the circle is actually drawn from the square. And so from the square, I cross diagonally the corner, opposite corner, 45 degrees, and from there I'm able to draw the vertical and horizontal axis, and then that pretty much is, in reality, that's half. And then I'm able to join, I can do it in 2 steps. By linear, like an octagon or hexagon, and then I can just draw my curve to show the circle. So the circle comes out from our old friend, the square, from there. And again, as well, the triangle, it always comes down from the square. There it is, I have my perfect triangle. Okay, so basic shape, and from the basic shape, we are able to create complexity out of everything. So next slide, we have looked at what actually shading means. Well, shading, it's a technique, and it's used to represent the light and the shade of any object with various intensity, tonal intensity, depending on the area the light hit the surface. So where there is a very high level of light, then there is more a light tonal value. When there is actually a shading part, then we have much darker area. We see the sample of the outline drawing. It's kind of flat. It doesn't give us a sense of depth and dimension, so we use the tonal value And we have seen it in the first week how that does it work. So shading is the next step that we undertake from any outline drawing that we need to do. Now, what are the techniques to do this shading? Well, there are kind of 5 common techniques, and these are used to create different shades. So the first one, now they are not in order of importance. It all depends on how we are going to represent the reality. One is by using of the gradient, or also what we call a sfumato. The second is of linear hatching, usually is 45-degree hatching in a very regular intervals. And the second one is cross hatching. Now, the difference between hatching and cross hatching is we use cross hatching when we need to create a more in-depth dark tonal value, or when we need to create more a rough texture to it. So we use cross hatching. Stippling is kind of use these dots, and usually we do use stippling with ink pen or felt pen. Rarely, very rarely, we use that with a pencil. Pencil we use with a sfumato, with hatching, cross hatching, as well as ink. We use hatching, cross hatching. We don't use gradient with ink pen, but with stippling and scribbling, we use as a tool, the best tool to use it are the ink pen and as well the pencil. So if I have to give you kind of pointed out what are the ink pen or felt pen for the shading technique, we'll use hatching with the pen, cross hatching again with a pen, stippling with a pen or felt pen, and scribbling with a pen. Whereas the pencil is more versatile, and we can use pretty much more for the gradient, the hatching, cross hatching, and scribbling. Now, stippling or dotting, it can be used with a pencil, but it's not as effective as the pen. And then again, there are some artists that are able to do that as well. But we really encourage you to go through with the pencil first, and then use the pen to experiment this technique. Now let's have a look at some sample of object of interior using this technique. Now in this slide we have a look at scribbling. Now you can see this as we have the vase, and again now they use a sfumato for the background just to give a bit more different tonal value or a different technique, different material, and then you can see how the scribbling is working on the object. So if you have a look at it, or the scribbling there, the artists give a more darker and more close texture to create the dark tonal value, create a more sense of roundness of the object. Okay? Whereas on the light part right over there, then is more open. So your scribbling is more open. Whereas if I want to have like a darker area, then that's where my scribbling is more close. You can see the difference between the openness of the line art and the closeness. So I have two different tonal value. One almost 75% darker, and the second one is almost 20% darker. The trick is to do it for each of the 10 tonal value that we have it. Now, why do we use this scribbling? Well, this kind of measure is a matter of preference. It all depends on what kind of object or what kind of artistic representation you need to render your image. But for our course for this week, it's always good to practice all of them, so you had a feeling of which one you have a personal preference to it, and which one you're more able to master it. Now, the next one is stippling. Now, we can see here a very good sample of this object with a different surface. And again, we see how it is used. And you can really see here is 100% almost dark. And this is a really beautiful sample, how the artist was able to create the sense of, you know, convex and convex shape of the surface. Now you can see in here almost rounded and then goes inside, and that almost part is just come on top of it. Okay, so it's kind of really nice. If I do a section, I have something like that happening on my skull. Okay, so again, you can see there is no line, there is just a line is defined by dots. Which is, technically speaking, a line, it doesn't exist theoretically because it's just a series of points aligned together. So if I have 3 points over there, my eyes perceive as just one line. If I have point dot like that, my brain perceives that something like that. So as you can see, there is no line in the stippling technique, just dot. And this actually is a very well solved representation of the surface and how the surface works in ondulate. Now, this is a sample of hatching and cross-hatching. It's not, I would say it's not one of the best sample out there, but I think it gives you a very good idea of how does it work. Now, what is important in the hatching is that always do your hatching on 45 degrees. So always do that as much as you can regular, and you can have a different intensity or a different, or how wide your hatching is. So you can use intensity, and you can use how wide your line of hatch it works. Now, if you need to create more darker area, like in the sample, then you can kind of cross hatch. And one of the masters suggests always do it slightly off 45 degrees, and then you increase it as you draw further down the darkest tonal value, tonal areas of your tonal value. Now, why there is this 45 cross 45 rather than have a 45 and then a 50 degrees and then a 60 degree? Well, it's very simple. This was a technique used with the ink. You might remember the ink pen, really old-fashioned, with a bottle of ink. And so for a technique or for a different purpose, we used to do 45 degree and then hatch it across 45 degree. And that was it. That was the kind of technique was learned through the art school. But then they realized through the use of the pencil, you could have your sfumato by keep hatching at a small degree angle, and then with a sort of felt rub against the graphite to create that soft tonal value, eliminating the lead or the sign of the lead left on paper. And so from the hatching, then we create the sfumato or the gradient. So it's kind of an evolution of the technique. Now this is the most common technique of create a tonal value, especially with sketching interior design. Then we always go hatching and cross-hatching. I will show you some sample later on. And this is kind of your technique number one that you're going to master through your sketches of the space of the interiors. And it's very quick, it's very efficient, and it's very beautiful to look at it. So always you're hatching, cross-hatching with your fill pen. Now, I just explained about the sfumato gradient. Now, this is a very good sample of a very well-solved sfumato. It looks like a photograph because there is no sign of the pencil leaving the trace on the paper. But again, if you use a magnifying glass, you will see the mark of the pen or the pencil left on paper. And how do we do it is very simple, is produce a very light hatching with the pen. Sometimes we use the pencil, instead to have the pencil line on the paper as a sort of 30 degrees angle. We use the pencil very flat on the surface, so we can use a wider area of the graphite, and so they will give us a very wide area of tonal value, whereas when the pencil is more of a 30 degree, it will create a more thinner lines. And you can experiment. You just have your pencil. There is the line of paper that we're using. So usually we draw like that. With the sfumato, we just make a more flat. We use the flat surface to create the really soft tonal value. And again, we'll see the technique as you progress through. What is really important to grasp is that it is one layer at a time. It's just, we don't start with very deep dark. The dark area is actually the 10th time or the 10th layer that we draw with a pencil at a very large stages. So we do the first level is a 10% tonal value, then we draw the second tonal value, 20%, and we reach the intensity layer by layers with your pencil. So that is really important technique. They want to stress it out. The artist, for instance, this black area is just because he went through time after time after time, building up the darkness of the tonal value. So it's really building up, and we can demonstrate later on in some of the samples that we have it. Okay, so all of these techniques, they're really essential to learn how to do it, because it will depend on how we are going to render it, your drawing as we progress through. Okay, now this is another sample of cross-hatching of an interior of the space. What I want to emphasize in here, we only use the hatching to give a different materiality to the furniture. We just use an outline to create the perimeter of the room. So you can see you have the hatching, and we can kind of understand there is a carpet, there is some dark wooden furniture, and some objects. We have the canvas of the blinds and some reflection on the mirrors and some door. So there is a kind of a well-solved example of object on an interior setting. Now, why do we need hatching? Well, because if we draw a picture of an image just with the outline, we are not actually give a sense of the depth of the image we want to show. And so with the hatching, we provide that materiality with different tonal value, and therefore we can have that sense of depth and contrast of different materiality we have on the object. And now, as you can see, we not only use hatching, we also use the line art to show, for instance, the grain of the wood and the kind of texture of the box that we have right in there. It's always looks like you use an organic material. That box is a kind of soft hard material. And again, with the texture, we use a liner to create a sense of textile or a sense of print in our chair. So you can see how we're using all of these techniques combined together to provide a sense of materialities and texture and define the object of your interior. So always see at the bigger picture and use all these techniques to bring it together. So what are the tips to shade an object in 3D form? So always have a look at your light source. That's really important. First, then create a consistent shading tone across the whole picture. And then you build a darker value on the opposite side of your object. So, and what I would suggest is look at the real case sample, put an object, an apple, or whatever object you have it in front of your windows and look how the lights affect your shades and shadow across the surface, across the object, and across the room as well. Now, for efficiency, we use pressure to have a much stronger density of the shade. So when you're giving your tonal value, then you go with a very heavy hand on your pencil to create the richness of black to really give a sense of depth shadowing to it. And again, emphasize the contrast between shade and light that give you a sense of depth, give a sense of space, give a sense of dimension to your drawing. Now, here we see some sample of shading 3D form. Again, you have a different surface. And what we want to highlight in here is you always have a different tonal value. And we always break down this tonal value in three. Okay, so we have, for instance, the lighter, middle tone, darker tone, and the shadow. As you can see, you have lighter, middle tone, darker, and the reflection of your shadow. Again, with a sphere, we have the reflection of the light, middle tone, dark area, and the shadow. So you can see how the hatching works nicely. Now in the pyramid in here, that is quite interesting because it's actually show the reflectivity. Okay, so it's quite interesting. Or otherwise, you will only have kind of 3 band for your hatching. Again, simplify into 3 areas for your tonal shades of value. Again, now this is a practice of shading 3D form. What I want you to do for kind of a homework is you have your, instead to use an A3 sketch pen, I really encourage you to use an A5 pen, which is much easier, and just draw a 3D form, locate your light source, and experiment with shading basic 3D form with different hatching technique. Just do this simple exercise and post on your discussion board, and we'll have a look at it just as a practical exercise. Now, what rendering it means, what does rendering mean? Well, rendering is the process of adding color, shading, texturing a drawing, and the goal is to give a sense of realism. So we can have a line drawing that is more on an outline, and then again with the hatching technique or with the liner, we create a different texture materials or pattern, and that is kind of two-dimensional rendering. But rendering is actually we create the materiality of an object, and we can use it through a shading and use of line art drawing. So there are two kind of important things to really print in mind: line art and shading, to create texture, to create materiality. Now, how do we do that? Well, that is an artistic skill that you will build with time. It doesn't come easy in one night, and you can use different tools and different techniques to have that, give that sense of dimension. Now, we see some of the rendering tools. The most common are your set of pencil from the different hardness of the lane, like HB, B, 2B. Now, what that means, it means a different softness of your graphite. So if you do an architectural drawing or interior design drawing, then you will use your construction drawing using an HB or 2H, because the line will be very soft, and then you firm in with a 2B pencil to have a much darker line, so they will give you a very clear sense of direction. So we'll then can use markers, we can use color pencil, we can use different kind of sketch pen or paper. And what is really important is we use a lot of tracing paper. So tracing paper is almost your best friends while you do your sketches and your designing. So it means you can do many mistakes, and you actually draw with your mistakes. That was really important. Your final drawing is just one mistake after the other combined together, and they will give you your beautiful, perfect, excellent drawing. So your perfect drawing comes from your mistaken drawing. There is no perfect drawing without your mistaken drawing. So if I do, for instance, very quickly, draw a cube, so I can, start very roughly, and then I just keep going and refining my cube until I get it right. So you can see that I'm keep actually making a mistake for my cube, but the sum of the mistake of the line I'm making, it just creates that perfect representation of the cube until I outline my perfect drawing. Okay, so this is kind of concept that I really want to emphasize, because that's how we draw. We draw from the mistakes all the way moving forward, and we don't really rub it off. It's almost like rubber, we don't really use it professionally in our drawing. So you don't really need your rubber. Just leave it your drawing. So these are the tools that we're going to have a look at as we move forward. Now, here we saw a sample of color pencil rendering, and in here what we want to emphasize is we use color just to emphasize the different materiality of the furnitures. And we look a bit on the, on the windows, so we show the ambient, the landscape, and we as well use color pencil to show the shadows under the sofa, so that kind of our furniture, they're not floating on the space. And pretty much that's it. In here we only emphasize the furniture. So it's barely a bit flat as a drawing, I would say, but the use of perspective with the tile on the floor, it gave us a sense of a big space, very luminous, because we have the window all over the side of the room, and we just use color to emphasize the texture and the furniture in the room, and is actually is a room in a very open seafront or ocean view of it. Now the next one, we use the watercolor rendering, and here when we use that, for instance, if you want to have a very wide surface, just to create a sense of color overview of the object or of the furniture that we want to have it, and we provide different intensity with the use of the color to provide a sense of materiality of the wooden grain, for instance. So very simple, very efficient. That's what the color is used a lot, because it's very quick. So you don't have to kind of use it again and again and again and again. So watercolor, I would say, is predominantly used for a very quick render of the overall view of the image. And when you brush it, you just brush it once and brush it twice, and then it's done. If you brush a third time, then you start to mess around your beautiful render of the color. So I always like, you have a different sheets of paper beside you and test it first, and then you go in when you are secure of the color that you want to do. So again, pencil, it would take much longer, more refined tools. Watercolor is quick and fast, and it gives you a very direct image of your drawing of your intention. Again, that is another watercolor rendering. In this case, what we want to emphasize is a kind of a sense of the room. So there is not much of a shadow, but we just use the very deep blue for the wall, and we use the blue marine for the carpet, and just a touch of black for the furniture, and just a very neutral color palette to define where is the ceiling. Cushion, touch of red, that's just one brush. And with a few brushes, you can see how quick it is to give a sense of the room with the sense of furnishing that you have it in there. So you can see there's actually the sofa is not wooden, it's just this texture or texture used is, soft furnishing. And a sense of that very traditional deep blue navy style that you want to achieve in your room, and you understand there is a very, very luminous room by the window and the opening reflecting the light up the ceiling. Okay, very quick and easy watercolor. Now, mixing technique is actually a series of steps. In this case, we see step 1, step 2, and step 3. And again, we see a reference for the photograph. So how do we start that? Well, if we have a reference of a photograph, like we have it in this case, we kind of draw all of the line art first. And then from the line art first, we use the fine liner or marker or fill pen to really draw into the pencil drawing. Now in here, what we also do, and doesn't show the steps, so that's kind of step number 1. Then we use the watercolor to just create that flat surface on the wall. And then again, we mix together with the color. And then give you quite a very complex drawing, because we have the fine line of the fill pen. They really define precisely the shapes and form of the furniture. And then we have that beautiful warm watercolor. They give a sense of materiality and depth with a very dark, rich black used for the wall. And when you combine together, you have a very rich mix of rendering in your drawing. So this is a beautiful sample that illustrates how you combine the different techniques together and how you kind of achieve a good result in your drawing. Okay, so we see kind of break it down. And if I go back to the slide, see line art, then use a kind of one-tone color, and then we use different colors, again, use watercolor technique. Now, pencil, you also use it just to soften some area or to emphasize, give a more control in some of the area, like for instance, around in there or around in there. So you can use your pencil to refine some more drape or create more contrast, whereas the watercolor you just use for a flat surface. Okay, next I want to just give you a very good sample of actually what we are talking about, standard, a quality standard. This is a very sample of professional designer, interior designer. They use their technique to demonstrate what is kind of your benchmarking. You know, this is a put together for you, so you see, okay, that's how I benchmark what I need to achieve. Now, this is a very beautiful sketch using hatching, very regular. This is a three-dimensional sketch in perspective, and uses just two tools, the fine line maker and a pencil to give a sense of where actually the glass facade is. But what I really want to draw attention in here is actually the hatching. See how the designer used the horizontal hatching for the surface, vertical and horizontally. So if he has on the ground, he's actually used the horizontal hatching. So you give a sense of property to the flat plane. If there is a surface that is actually up vertical, then you might tend to use a vertical hatching. And they give, again, a more strong sense of the plane of your construction or of your space. And then note how it does is cross-hatching just to give a more contrast between the ceiling, the counter ceiling, and the facade of level 2. And again, see how you can use the hatching, again, vertically. And then interesting is also use the hatching in a perspective manner. You can see it goes down to the focal point into his horizontal line of the perspective. And again, as we had seen last week, reference your silhouette of people. It gives a sense of the space. So I understand this actually is kind of an atrium in a very big building with huge windows that brings a lot of light into the place. And then I have my beautiful furniture, carpet, and etc. So you can see in a very mastery way, the designer is able to show in a very quick and efficient way the space, some sort of materiality, and the light of the space. So this is an excellent sample of sketching with the fill pen that I really want to kind of benchmark towards that. Now the second one is with the graphite on paper, and here we see a very effective way to use the sfumato or the gradient. And again, see how the designer or the artist really used dark area to bring up the depth and the contrast between the ceiling and the wall, or how it brings the materiality, the difference in contrast between that wall and the stairs. And I can see this is a different material from the wall on the stairs. and again the furniture, and again how the floor with this really long different tonal value of the band, it give a sense of almost wooden floor, and the reflection right in there with a tonal value. And then again, there is, the beautiful white contrast. So it always, the light comes down from the front of the building. And I see that kind of the dark area is around in there. And interesting enough, we have the difference of lighting. So I can see there is actually some neon light bouncing from the bottom. Okay, so there is a beautiful sample of a sfumato. Now, if I look at that drawing, I also would say this is a drawing that it doesn't take an hour to complete. So if I see that drawing as drawing that has taken a good 30 hours, 35 hours from conception to the final drawing. So time is also of essence. So it takes time to get that done. Now, this is another beautiful sample of using just markers. And here, the artist and designer is successful using the markers only to show the windows, the materiality of the furniture, and the texture of the wall. The rest of the room is not really important to show because we don't really care. So the attention is only focused on the materiality and the decorations that we have on the room. You can see the light where it comes in. We can see there is kind of on the canvas and the vase right in there. Beautiful use of the shadows and very simple and efficient. And there is a very beautiful sample of a marker rendering. Again, it looks complex, but it actually, there is only a few strokes of very well decided color to show your intention of the design. Now, this is a very exquisite watercolor drawing, and why it is so successful is because the artist has just used the light in a very profound manner and just used this sophisticated, really used tonal value from darker tone to lighter one, or to lighter to darker. So usually the technique to achieve that is also using a sponge, but we'll look at it in detail much later. And again, the materiality and the tonal value, you see, of the stairs, use of the windows, and again, a few brushes. Again, this is a very beautiful exquisite use of watercolor. And you can see that what is successful in there is because it's used only at 2, maximum 3 color tonal value on the drawing, and therefore, because was able to represent the line and tonal value into the room, that's why I give a sense of realism, so successful. And there is another sample of the same artist. Now you can see in here the technique she used. There is this band of very wide brushes. But then again, you can see she used the blue colors or tonal value to give a sense of materiality of the grass. And a few broken tile in there to say, well, this is actually the floor and has been quite an old floor because people have walked and cracked it. And again, look at the shadows, the reflection of the windows, counter ceiling, and so on. Now, how she did it? Well, very simple. She used a beautiful reference to do it. So make sure that your reference is actually accurate, is actually right in there. So how do we kind of tips that we have to render an object in or furniture in action? So light source, again, really look at the light source first thing first. Look at the picture, look where the light is, look where the shadows are, look the total value in between, like this sample this artist has done. She has seen where the lights are, where the shadows are, and what total values are in between. Break it down, that picture, analyze it. Choose your color palette. Okay, before starting, don't have so many color. Here in here, I have like 2, maximum 3 color palette. There is the brownish, there is the grayish, and there is the bluish. And everything in between. 2, 3 color palettes, that's how reality is. Always keep white space, resting areas for the eyes. You can see the artist in there. She has left some white space. Look, the reflection from the window. So white space is important to create contrast, okay? And when you do your first draft on your drawing, then photocopy, so you can keep constructing or drawing on top of the next one. Lastly, I want you to do some practice rendering object and interior for your week. So some do some drawing using a pencil grades or fine liners. Test with some color pencil. Do some tests as well with markers. Give it a go with watercolor. Just use the brush on a paper to see how they react. And keep in mind that to look at your objects, your light source, and again, experimenting. This is just a kind of see how you handle the pencil, the markers, the line drawing. See how they respond differently. And see how you can create light and shadow with this tool, with this instrument. Use a simple object and see how you go. And you will see how that you get your things. And you can use some objective and interior to do this exercise as well. Okay, so just use one object and render this object. Can be a chair, can be a table, can be a sofa, can be a lamp. It can even be a vase. You don't really necessarily to use a furniture. Just use one, maximum 2 objects in a space. Okay, so we see how does it work the object on the ground, how does it do the object on the foreground, where the light sits, and where the light's bouncing back. And we kind of finish our kind of week 2 module. And yeah, happy to get any questions you have it for this week too.
I think we're good.
Yeah, great.
That was good. Thank you. Enjoyed that today.
I'm glad you all kind of stay on focus for. Well, this is kind of an overview. I really encourage you to review the presentation that we have done or we have exposed tonight. But what is essential is they start experimenting with the different tools, review the lecture that we have had it, look again at the sample that I publish, and they will give you kind of okay, I have these tools, I need to do some practical exercise, and that's where I need to aim to it. So practice this, break it down, practice, do some exercise. So you will able for your assessment 1 have a very good result of it. And then we can have kind of one-on-one sessions together to just refine and give you some feedback. Now, Mercy is asking, in regards to the first assignment. And today, there any certain times we are supposed to use a light box, and then another time we are supposed to freehand. So the first step is very simple to respond to Mercy, and thanks for raising that question, is choose the objects that you want to draw and trying to draw the outline. And when you do the outline, draw the structure of the outline. Then use a tracing pad or your windows, if you don't have a light box, to redraw on top of the sketches, of the structural sketches. So in a way, you refine that beautiful, simple outline to create that specific object or that specific draw that you want to represent of it. So it's a process that you refine as you go through. So the sketch, when you do, will be very loosely, might not be accurate, might not be in scale, might not be in proportion. That's why you use the light box, and or use your windows to redraw on top of it, so you can correct any mistake you made in scale and proportion to it. Use the pencil as your first instrument. Then if you want to define further, then you use a fill pen to do just one simple outline, because the aim is to have just one single line to do your drawing. So this is your kind of final, your final aim to it. And then you're just moving and progress further to it. Okay. Now, having said that, I think we can kind of terminate the session for tonight. I think everyone has kind of passed their time and attention to it. And so what I encourage you to post on the discussion forum. Thank you to everyone who has kind of introduced themselves and post their beautiful places and city. So some beautiful location that people have actually visited. It's fantastic. And we'll keep getting this conversation happening on the discussion forum. We'll post as well some resources for you to look further. And I'll see you all on Thursday for color explorations, and as well Thursday from 4 to 5. Email me and we'll get the conversation happening again for your assignment and for further feedback on your drawing. So really encourage you this week, start experimenting with pencil, fill pen, tracing pad, sketching, drawing structure of your object, experiment with your markers, color pencil and watercolor to represent the color, materiality, and tonal value of the light and shadow. And having said that, I thank you very much who have been present tonight. I really appreciate everyone turning up. I hope it was an interesting and inspiring session. And I'll see you everyone online and next Thursday.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone. Bye.